I saw that you wrote a Medium article. It was why we can be certain Bitcoin will never be shut down. Maybe I just want to have you start off with explaining the cliff notes of your article.
Oh, sure, of course. It's one of the things that are often put to people like me who are pro-Bitcoin. It's like, oh, the government will shut it down. And this argument comes up time and time again. And to me, it's an irrelevant argument because it can't be done. The time where that was possible has already passed. And quite often I quote one particular sort of what I consider a cast iron precedent of that, which is something called the Pirate Bay, which some of your viewers may or may not be aware of, but it's basically a very large illegal file sharing site. It's a place you can go and get whatever you want free of charge, but of course completely illegally. And there's huge incentive for governments around the world to shut this down because it costs the industry billions of dollars a year, costs something like 230,000 American jobs a year, according to one report that I've seen. So it's a big problem. They want to shut these things down, but it's now been operating almost completely uninterrupted for 2 decades. And it doesn't matter what you try and do, you cannot shut this operation down. So you try and apply that to something like Bitcoin, which is another decentralized system. But in this case, it's not an illegal operation. It's going to be so much harder to do.
So I fully agree with that. And, I get that question a lot, like, is Bitcoin going to be shut down by people who are just coming into the market? But what we do know is that governments, they might not be able to shut Bitcoin down, but they can make it pretty hard to trade it, right? And so I think that's, for example, we saw this in China, right? I mean, China basically cracked down on exchanges. They just made it a lot harder for the mainstream population to use Bitcoin. And I mean, how much of a threat is that? Because you're right, it will not be snuffed out entirely, but governments can actually make it very, very difficult for individuals to access this market.
Yeah, Emily, I think you've hit the nail on the head here, really, because you can make it very difficult, but you can't stop it. Use the China example. We've got a more recent example now, of course, with Nigeria. And the only way you can really attack this is from the on and off ramps, right? So that's through the exchanges. That's where you convert your Bitcoin back into your local fiat currency. And it's the only real sort of angle of attack. But all you can successfully do is you can't stop Bitcoin. You can effectively remove yourself from the Bitcoin network on behalf of your people. But the trouble is your people aren't necessarily going to agree with this. And workarounds are a lot simpler than you think because they'll switch to peer-to-peer networks, they'll switch to neighboring jurisdictions, they'll run VPNs. We've seen all of this. So we now know that every attempt to shut Bitcoin down has not succeeded so far and has usually just led to a premium in the Bitcoin price.
Well, Jason, I just want to say I've never visited Pirate Bay. Don't know what you're talking about. We'll leave it at that. But let's get to the nitty gritty. Do you have a price target on Bitcoin at all in the next few months?
You sprung that one on me there, Lawrence, didn't you? So I would say I'm quite famous for never giving a price target for Bitcoin, but I will say, I always say the same thing. The Bitcoin fundamentals are excellent. The stuff that's being developed right now is incredible. Remember, this network is being designed not just to transmit value over long distances, but over long periods of time. So I think we are going to be going northwards, of course, but where we're going to end up, I couldn't possibly say. So,
what do you, in terms of macroeconomic factors, are you looking at interest rates at all? And if so, what part of interest rates, how are interest rates affecting the price of Bitcoin? Do you think it's more about right now the ability for people to borrow to buy Bitcoin, or is it more as a signal about inflation? What factor do you think is more important here?
Well, I think on an individual sort of micro level, the fact that people can borrow, not necessarily saying they should, but because people can borrow to buy Bitcoin very cheaply, I'm sure that is happening. On a macro level, you've got two problems with our currencies right now. It's not just in the US, it's pretty much everywhere else as well, where we are producing new money very quickly. We're looking at devaluation. So your assets in the bank are devaluing anyway. So you'd normally offset that by getting some interest back, but you can't do that now either because interest rates are too low, and in some places they're negative. So you have to pay the bank to look after the money, right? So people are looking for alternative assets, and Bitcoin seems to me to be a very logical asset. And it's the reason that Michael Saylor made his investment in August, and it's been cited by CEOs since.
Jason, I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on decentralized finance and investment in that space.
Yeah, I mean, some of my colleagues actually at Quantum Economics are real experts in this area. I mean, I think decentralized finance is going to happen. It's the way forward, and it's happening now, of course. I use decentralized finance myself with certain organizations. So to me, this is a no-brainer. It's the next natural step with the ecosystem that we're developing now. So yes, DeFi is here to stay.
And what do you think?
I'm sorry, I lost you there. What was that last question?
Sorry. What do you think about the current NFT boom? Do you think it has legs? Do you think it's gonna keep going?
Well, I'm smiling slightly because it's a little crazy, I think. I'm not quite sure what's going on here. It makes me think sort of ICO 2017, but I'm sure other people have said that as well. I mean, look, the idea is fantastic, isn't it? I mean, what a brilliant idea to have some sort of, real digital scarcity in pretty much any format that you like. Brilliant concept. The amounts of money that are being thrown around right now, the fact that people are actually destroying art but only in digital format, that concerns me a lot. I'm not sure that's going to end well, just in my view.